Now that we've set up our form, our HTML, we're ready to dive back into our JavaScript and finish off our front-end JavaScript coding. So making the form functional, we're going to post to this route with the body information from the form inputs and send that over to Pusher. And then also we need to set up retrieving and receiving that information that's being sent. So let's open up our editors, and we've set up our HTML. We're going to do the JavaScript and the HTML on the same page, and then we'll break that up after we finish up the lesson so that we can always refer back to our HTML when we need to look for different elements on our page. So we've got our pusher is working, so that's all working. We're picking up, we've bound the data, so we're retrieving that data whenever that content comes in. So there are a few functions that we should set up. So one of the functions that we can set up is we can say new comments. So this one can listen for and retrieve out any new comments that come in. Function to clean this up, send whenever that event bind is fired off that we're going to pick up, and we'll make use of those comments. So just grab the new comments and let's clean this one up. So there we go. So that is still now doing the same thing, still picking up those comments. Let's try it out, just to make sure everything is still working. We need to go back to Postman, do a send. And we're still getting our data coming through. We can see it within the console log, so perfect. Everything's still working properly. I always like to check every now and then just to make sure that nothing has broken before we start continuing building out our code. So the other thing that we wanted to do is we want to add an event listener. So we want whenever the button gets clicked, then we actually want to submit our form. So let's go ahead and do that, and we're going to add an event listener. So let's grab our element. So document, and we can use query selector. We need to specify what we're listening for. So we're listening for mess sender. So that's our form. So that's ID. So do the hash. So document query selector and adding our event listener. So add event listener. And we're listening for a submit of that form. And if the form gets submitted, then we'll fire off a function that's add comment. That's the function that we're going to fire off. So we need to add that function. So add comment is the function that we want to fire off whenever the form gets submitted. So a few things that we want to do here, because we're going to be making an AJAX request. So we actually want to prevent the default firing, the default submission of the form. So that's event prevent default. So that's a function in JavaScript that allows you to prevent the default action of the element. So save that and let's try that out. So now we should have our form should be submitting, and it's actually not doing anything because we're not actually doing anything within here. So let's console log out and we'll just do clicked. Or clicked. So save that, refresh that, and we've got to make sure that we filled that out. So there we go. So we've got clicked. So that's functioning. So our form submission is functioning. We're ready to retrieve that information and send that comment over to Pusher. So let's do that first. So this is going to be an AJAX request, sending that data, posting that data over to the server side. So that's going over to our index.js, just like what we were doing with Postman, where we're posting over to this route, and then the route is going to pick up that requested body information, trigger the pusher. So going back in here, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to set up our comment data. So let's set up a variable, we'll call it new comment, and create an object out of that. And then within here, let's set up, so we've got a few parameters that we're expecting. So we're expecting a name and we're expecting a message. So let's set those up. So in a JSON format, so a name, and then we can do document, get element by ID. And we do have IDs for those. So the first one is username. So we can simply get element by ID, username. As it's element by ID, we don't have to be specific that it is an ID because it's looking for IDs. And of course, you could use query selector all as well. Oh, that's supposed to be a comma because it's an object, of course. And then we need to grab the other value, so the value for message. And the value for message is going to be equal to the contents of what's contained in here. So next, so we've got our object we've got within the console. We can output into the console. So I'm going to leave that in there. So when we go for testing, we can see that when we're trying to submit the form, we're going to see that popping up. So now let's create our XHR object. So make our AJAX request. So XML HTTP request. So create a brand new HTTP request. And of course you could use, if you've got jQuery, you could do it within jQuery, you could do it with fetch. So there's a number of different options how you can do that. So open, and we're doing a post. So the method is post, and we need to have a URL in order to post to. And we know that it's going to be within the same route as our file is located, but if you got it posting somewhere different, then make sure that you get that path proper. So all we're doing is posting over to comment. Let's double check. So we are posting to the route comment on the same server, of course, or same URL. And let's set it true, so asynchronous. And we need to also set some headers. So set request header. So this is important. And this is the same thing that we saw with Postman, that we have to specify that the content type is equal to, and that's application /JSON, because we're sending it within a JSON format. So character set UTF-8. So just double check, make sure that that's correct. And we also need to do the XHR on ready state. So we're listening for the changes in the ready state. And once we retrieve back those changes, then we're gonna output into the console first. So we'll output that console log of that request, so the XHR response text. So we'll output that into the console. And we also need to make sure that our ready state is 4, as well as our status is 200. So let's add those in as well. So if XHR ready state is equal to 4, or there's actually another way to do that as well. So we can check to see if it's not equal to 4, or if it's XHR status is not equal to 200, then all we need to do is just return this. So that means that we don't have to wrap. So basically what's going to happen within the function, if this is true, then we're just going to return it and breaking out of this function. And then once these are true, then we're going to console log out that response text. And then last but not least, of course, we need to send our XHR object. So we need to stringify our content that we're sending. So our new comment, that needs to be stringified. So we can send it within a string format to the backend. And that's what is going to be retrieving that information. So it looks like we're ready to try that out. So let's go back in here. And this time we should see, we're probably not going to need Postman anymore, but we'll just keep it open just for another second longer, refresh, and now we can put content in there, and we see that it's popping in there, and we're also picking it up in real time. So if we have another browser open and we send that through there, we can see that we're picking it up in both of them. And that's exactly what we want, because we want these real-time messages. And as soon as anybody posts a message, and if the user has the browser open, we want that message to be built out there. And we want that user to be able to see those messages. So that's what the whole idea with the real-time and pusher. So that's set up. And the next thing that we need to do, so we can actually go ahead and we can close Postman. We're not going to need Postman anymore. And we can continue to build out our page. So the other thing that we needed to do as well is that within the console log at the top, we're logging out all of those messages as they're coming in. So we've got this new comments, and ideally what we want to do is we want to post that comment into messages. So I'll show you how to do that coming up next.